Members, it's time to resume the meeting. Next member to speak. Deputy Chair, Mr. Chen Pui-Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I support this item. I have two questions. First, paragraph 11 of the paper refers to a covered pedestrian walkway connecting to Tung South. And you'll study the feasibility. Does the cost include this covered footbridge, and that would it be commissioned at the same time in 2029 when the office building is completed? The second question is that for the joint user complex, there are 2 stories that comes with teaching as well as welfare facilities. And then I see that there is also another building for welfare services in Tung North at the back. So in that case, shouldn't we save the space of the 2-story building for other government operations and relocate the welfare facilities to the Tung North building? Ms. Ho. Thank you, member, for the support. Now, the member referred to the covered walkway linking the joint user building complex to Tung South. Now, we think that this footbridge will be completed as quickly as possible, and this will not affect the progress of this project. We want to have a barrier-free 24-hour walkway with 24-hour access. When it comes to residents coming in from other areas other than the station, we want to make sure there is a covered walkway connecting the joint user complex and the station as well. Now, as far as cost implications, that should not pose a major problem because there are other projects undertaken by the CDD. So if additional costs are entailed, we can have the sum deducted from other construction projects. About the integrated welfare facilities building near the site, as mentioned by the member, it comes with a background. We carried out a clearance exercise for the residential care home at Dill's Corner. I mean, we wanted to do that, and we started with an integrated facilities building for decanting the affected elderly residents. So this building comprises mostly elderly residential care services, which means that the building serves a different group of users other than children and young people of childcare centers and youth centers. Next, Mr. Dennis Leung. Chairman, I support this project. However, the administration has not fully considered the lack of parking spaces in Tung North. And I'd like to express my grave concerns. Why is it that despite studies and consultations, the administration has not taken heed to members' advice and fully optimized the use of sites for multiple purposes? The PS just now mentioned private residential developments in the vicinity. However, they base their development parameters on the needs in their own neighborhood. The government cannot rely on private developments to solve the problem of insufficient parking. Whilst I fully appreciate that basement parking may entail a greater sum of cost, you still need to take this into account. You should not compromise basic facilities simply because you want to reduce cost, and I am dissatisfied with the situation. My second concern is that it's some distance from Kutong North. You need to go through a private residential development in order to go to the MTR station. There will also be a public transport interchange. Now, you mentioned the barrier-free access, but I don't see that in the paper. Is it a footbridge or is it a subway? Because there'll be a footbridge linking the southern side with the two private residential developments. The government will also build a footbridge traversing the Fanning Highway. But then there are other facilities such as a kindergarten, healthcare facilities, a sports center, and there is also a roundabout. I'm concerned about the safety coefficient and whether the so-called access or road crossing will be sufficient to cope with the future situation in Hangshi Road, and I want to know whether there'll be a footbridge linking the JUB and the MTR station.
Permanent Secretary. The member asked about car parking spaces. We understand members' concern. We want to share some information with members. If we are to add a basement car park, the construction costs will go up. It will cost $400 million more. Also, excavation works will have to be carried out, and that would lengthen the construction program. According to our estimate, it will take another 9 months for us to complete the project if we add a basement car park. As you can see from our paper, we really want to speed up the project. For the government complex, we want to complete it within 3.5 years. If we are to build a basement car park, it will take another 9 months. And that would deviate from our goal to speed up the project. But this doesn't mean that we neglect residents' needs for car parking spaces. We encourage local residents to make use of public transport, especially the mass transit system. Therefore, we are going to provide 20 car parking spaces for public use. And as mentioned, there will be 200 some car parking spaces for government officials as well as staff of public organizations. During weekends, those car parking spaces will be made available for public use. Plus, the car parking spaces to be provided by private development projects, we think the supply will be enough. As for the connection between the joint user complex and the private development, I agree that we need enough road crossing facilities, and we have already incorporated them into our design. A number of members have expressed their views on car parking. When administration replied to Mr. Cheng Hock Fung's questions, it said it will provide information after the meeting regarding the number of car parking spaces to be provided within a 5-minute walking distance from the joint user complex. Let's see if members have any new questions to be asked from another perspective. Otherwise, please refrain from asking about car parking. Ms. Christine Fong. I support the construction of this joint user complex. We need officers to drive the development of the northern metropolis. A few thousands of civil servants will be working there. From the community perspective, well, the joint user complex will make public the 220 car parking spaces for public use during weekends. My question is, in low-density areas around where the village houses are, will there be spaces for car parking? Second question. $200 million are saved with the returned tender price. However, I'm looking at 14C. About $1.4 billion will be spent on construction. There will be a lot of greening works to be carried out on top of the sports center. I'm concerned about the waterproof layers. There will be vegetation and greening areas. I want to know how much would it cost. Also, I'd like to talk about the bridge to the south of the site. I hope that Tung South could be connected with Chun. I see that there will be a 3-lane two-way carriageway. Will you provide more crossing facilities? And also on the fencing center, there will be 1,000 spectator seats. Will the CSD install lighting facilities for large-scale competitions? Permanent Secretary. I'll defer to my colleagues to talk about the waterproof layer. First, I'd like to thank the member for the idea. The member asked whether we could make use of nearby government land to provide car parking spaces. We could perhaps turn those government land into short-term tenancy sites. Well, we will actively identify such land. If we're able to find any government land available, we will convert them into temporary car parking spaces. Also, Tung South will be connected to the open space next to the joint user complex through a bridge. The bridge will span across Castle Peak Road and other busy roads. And we do not have any plans currently to build another bridge because we will rely on the bridge in our design. I see that population density will not be very high in Tung South, and therefore we think one bridge will be enough. As for whether there will be any lighting facilities such as LED in the sports center, yes, there will be such facilities in place. Yes, Mr. Lee? We will closely monitor the works on the green rooftop. We make use of nets to prevent roots from growing in the wrong direction. And we will also take into consideration the design of the entire building when we construct the green rooftop. 13 members are still waiting to speak. I hope members will pay attention to the time. After Ms. Michelle Tang has spoken and the relevant government officials have replied, I will draw a line. So Members who would like to speak, please watch the time. Ms. Michelle Tang. Thank you, Chairman. Compared to the paper submitted by the administration previously, I see that about $260 million have been saved. The government has been working very hard to save money and increase revenue, and I appreciate this effort. However, we should not always pursue the cheapest design. We have to make sure that public money will be made use of effectively. We should build facilities that citizens will be proud of. We as architects and engineers appreciate this project because this is a very rare one. If we can ensure the success of this project, we'll be able to enjoy the fame of it. A number of professionals have told me this. This is a project that costs billions of dollars. How come the government did not hold any design competitions to identify a good design? Now, on central procurement, I understand it could help save money. However, past experiences showed us that we may not be able to procure the right materials through such centralized procurement strategy. And there were also problems with bulk procurement previously. So how will the government ensure that it will procure the right materials? Permanent Secretary. On centralized procurement as well as the MIC construction method, I will ask Mr. Lee to supplement. Well, this is not the first time for the government to procure materials for MIC construction. We adopted the same strategy when we built light public housing estates. So we have such an experience, and the Architectural Services Department is responsible for that. So I'll ask the director to supplement afterwards. Regarding the question of why we didn't hold a competition, well, I think different approaches and strategies have their merits. For this particular project, we hope that the joint user complex could be completed as soon as possible. Therefore, during tendering, we specified that contractors will have to complete the joint user complex within 3.5 years' time, and for the rest, they will have to be completed within 4 years' time. This is a large-scale government complex, and we hope that we could drive the development of the district through this project. Therefore, we want to expedite this project as much as possible. However, we want to emphasize that it doesn't mean we cannot secure a good design. From the enclosures, you'll be able to look at the details of the design. I believe that the design meets our standards. It is simple and contemporary. And we believe that we can further improve the design at the detailed design stage. We have heard members' views, and we will make sure that we will be able to adopt a good design. Mr. Michael Lee? The design is carried out in Hong Kong, and we adopt a centralized procurement strategy. Contractors, based on our requirement, help procure materials. We will deploy supervisors to help certify the materials procured. We have a system called MAS, and under our MIC approach, there is a list of contractors that are recognized by us. They are from the mainland, so we will adopt a stringent approach.
Now, I think Ms. Tang's concern is that if you take the central procurement approach, the parts procured may not be of the most suitable use. I appreciate the concern, but then there are numerous projects undertaken by the government adopting the same MIC and central procurement approach. So from experience, would you conclude that the items procured will put to use eventually? Right, Ms. Jody Kwok. Thank you, Chair. The government will set up a joint user general office building in Northern Metropolis to drive local development. I support it. But then the project costs close to $10 billion. I want to make sure that this can meet the needs of local residents. Now, comparing to the paper given at the panel meeting, I see a lot of details in this PWSC paper, and I appreciate that. I have a number of questions. First, about residential care homes for the elderly. It's clear from the paper that for elderly population above the age of 65 in North District, it is estimated to go up by 100% from 556,000 in 2021 to 1.14 million. However, from the paper, I see that there are kindergartens, childcare centers, youth service centers, but not daycare centers for the elderly or other elderly facilities. Now, with a surge in elderly population, I want to know what will be done to meet the needs of 111,000 elderly in the district. Now, from the Permanent Secretary's explanation, I see that there are relevant facilities for use by the elderly, both in the joint user complex and other buildings. I'd like to know more about that. The second point is about the proportion of the provision of different facilities. Take kindergartens and childcare centers as an example. According to the paper, there will be 130,000 in the population in Kowloon North. There will be 6 classroom kindergartens and 100 places for childcare centers. They will take up altogether around 1,000 square meters. Now, let's take a look at the space for other uses in the building. In the age of digital reading and AI, there is a decline in the demand for physical books, and yet 3 stories are reserved for the library, and that is roughly 3,500 square meters. Likewise, for the postal and delivery services, the demand is dwindling, but then the office still takes up 1,200 square meters. So there is this perception among the public that we're not putting the space to the most optimal use. I want to know the principles behind in allocating the space for different uses, whether this meets the genuine needs in the long term. Well, Ms. Kwok asked the second question. I believe that in terms of demand for community facilities, these are policy issues that should be discussed at the panel on development or other panels. As for the item discussed by the subcommittee here, with the support of the panel, the administration has adopted the design and other details of the project for deliberation by the subcommittee, including the overall environment, cost effectiveness, works progress, and issues stemming from the construction. I don't think it's appropriate for Ms. Kwok to ask these questions, but anyway, let's see if the PS would like to give a very brief response to how the design of this project meets the relevant requirements. Thank you. I will start with a very brief response, and then I'll give the floor to Deputy Director of LCS to explain about the need for this district library taking up so much space. The member mentioned various facilities, including childcare and youth facilities. the kindergarten. My position is this. When it comes to meeting the needs of the community, we should not just have eyes on these two buildings. In fact, in Kutong North, there are public housing estates coming on stream, such as Kuchun Estate, as well as another project under the Hong Kong Housing Society. In fact, years ago, we implemented the policy for new public housing estates. 5% of the floor area will be set aside for welfare purposes. The welfare facilities will include, say, facilities for the elderly, childcare centers, kindergartens. So that means we should consider the demand and supply on a broader scale. That is, for the whole community, apart from facilities in these two buildings, we are providing facilities to meet the demand in the whole district. We set aside 5% of the floor area in new public housing estates, for example, to accommodate these facilities. As for the library, I'll give the floor to Ms. Willie Choi, Deputy Director. Thank you, Chair. Like the PS said, in the vicinity of the joint user complex and joint user building, there are new public housing estates. In fact, we've taken a look at the usage of new libraries. In fact, there is demand coming from different age groups, and there is a need for the existence of libraries. I will give the floor to the Assistant Director, Mr. Lee, to explain the role and positioning of district libraries. Who will take this question, please, Mr. Lee? Yes, there is a general perception that people tend to borrow fewer physical books nowadays, but in fact, after COVID, the trend has begun to pick up. In a year, we lent 23 million books. Before COVID, now it's gone up to 30 million. And there is actually a slight decline in the borrowing of e-books. There is a need to provide libraries. It's not just a place for lending and borrowing books, taking the experience in the mainland, in other places. The library serves different stakeholders, including children, students, elderly, and adults. In fact, for the district library proposed here, it spans 3,500 square meters. It's not particularly large. For a new library recently commissioned in Sham Shui Po, for example, it's of a similar size. And apart from accommodating books, we will make use of the library to provide, say, an interactive area in the children's library, so that we can encourage parent-child reading. And then there'll also be an open interactive area on top of a self-study room. There is also an area that provides multimedia services for students. With technological advancements, our library is equipped with computers and other devices to provide services such as online browsing and other multimedia and e-resources such as e-books. This may not sound sufficient for other users, but in fact we have some self-service kiosks such as a 24-hour smart book drop and also a station for people to take out the library books that they've arranged to be borrowed. We also have 570,000 e-books in our collection. Well, thank you, Mr. Lee. I think we understand your supplementary answer, but Ms. Kwok's concern is this. Have you gauged the public demand in the future and the technological developments? E-books, that's just one example. Other members already mentioned other points, such as what Mr. Chen Hao-fung said about the future of the Hong Kong Post and how this can be accommodated in your design, say, by by using MIC or other approaches, you can achieve flexibility to meet different needs. If you have stacks and shelves of books in libraries, in the proposed library, then in the future, will you go digital? Just answer this question. Design-wise, we adopt modules. We use different modular units, so we keep things flexible. Well, I think that this is a concern of Ms. Kwok and other members. Don't keep things too rigid, or there'll be no wiggle room. And I think adopting modules is one good approach. Mr. Hong, come in. Now, the government adopts a single-site multiple-use development model in implementing the project of a joint user complex and joint user general office building at Kutong North. I think this is a very good idea, but I have some concerns. First, I'd urge the administration to strive to increase floor area, perhaps by optimizing the use of existing space so that we can increase the service level for elderly. The second point is this. Now, $4.6 billion earlier were set aside for the Hong Kong Post to fulfill its function. But as we know, the demand for postal service has continued to decline. So I strongly urge the administration to slash the size of the facility for Hong Kong Post here. Instead, you should keep the space for elderly services. The second question is this. According to paragraph 15, 4,900 people will move into the office building. In the long run, there will be more office workers. And I'm concerned about insufficient eateries nearby, especially during lunch. There are also problems with transport supporting facilities. Say if you have a sports center, there may be a greater demand for coaches. In the mainland, car parks are equipped with automated parking, and that parking spaces will automatically be allocated. Now, we already covered the issue of insufficient parking spaces, so will you consider introducing an automated system as well? The next point is about energy-saving green facilities. Will that be introduced in the private developments so as to help drive costs down if they're able to generate green energy? Yes. Well, Mr. Lee can explain in a moment, but I believe that the automated parking system will be used in this project. About green and energy-saving measures, the member also mentioned increasing floor space for elderly facilities. There is a demand for elderly services. That's our position. However, these services can be provided elsewhere other than in these two buildings. As explained, there are public housing estates nearby, and we've set aside 5% of the floor area for welfare uses. And I believe the majority of the space will be used for elderly services. So rest assured, as for Hong Kong Post, we'll continue to engage them in a discussion to see how much floor area, how much space they need, and that adjustments will be made if necessary. As for civil servants working in the JOB in the future and eateries, now for this project, there will be space for restaurants. To the north of this site, there are also private developments as well. There will be a mall. The mall will come with restaurants. I believe we'll be able to meet the needs of civil servants working there. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Lee.
泊車系統
我哋有嘅自動泊車系統咧，其實係拼
Yes, Mr. Lee. Yes, we will adopt an automated parking system. 80% of the car parks now use such an automated parking system. Mr. Andrew Lam. This project will cost close to $10 billion, and members of the public are concerned about the cost. The entire project will occupy a space of 180,000 square meters. With such a huge space, of course, it will come with a high price tag. Now I'd like to concentrate my questions on the costs. According to the administration, it has compared this project with other similar projects. I'll use the Carpenter Road as an example. The size of that project is about 1/3 of that of this project. However, the project on Carpenter Road does not adopt the MIC approach or the central procurement strategy. It is exactly because of this that I wouldn't simply say that the construction unit cost of this project is very expensive. I see that the government has adopted ways to compress the cost. For example, we have used the design and build approach, and 50% of the space you will make use of MIC approach. For 80% of the space you will make use of MIMEP. And you will also adopt the centralized procurement strategy. The procurement cost should be separated from the construction cost. So is there room for further compression of procurement cost? You've just provided an estimate. As for the $880 million of construction costs, how did you arrive at such a cost? Does that include the central procurement cost? My second question is simpler. There will be tiling works as well as greening projects, and you will also build a bridge. The bridge will be built by the CEDD, and in total it will cost some $400 million. I do not have a breakdown of the costs, but just by looking at the information, I see that there are greening elements in the Carpenter Road project as well, and the cost of that in the Carpenter Road project is very high. I hope that you will pay attention to this. I hope that you will provide a breakdown at the Finance Committee, and you should review the breakdown. I'll defer to Mr. Lee. Yes, Mr. Lee. The procurement cost is included, and we did not split the procurement cost. We want to wait until the returned tender price is ready to provide a breakdown. As to whether there is further room for compression of costs, before we come to this subcommittee, we took into account previous similar projects. For example, we looked at the cost of building the light public housing estates. We adopted the MIC approach at the light public housing project, but the project nature was a little bit different. And we applied the project estimate of the light public housing project to this particular one. Of course, we want to drive down the cost further, but we do not have the relevant estimate yet. And yes, we will review the breakdown of the cost. Mr. Andrew Lam asked two major questions, and I actually have similar questions in mind. This project cost some $9 billion. And you only have the returned tender prices of the total cost. As for the central procurement, you do not have the tender exercise yet. So there might be changes to the total cost of $9.7 billion. If it is like the light public housing estate project, you may be able to lower the cost, but if the returned price is higher, will you have to go back to the Finance Committee to ask for more funding? My understanding is that you haven't issued the tender documents yet, so you are not sure about the returned tender prices. I want to know, by adopting MIC, MIMEP as well as central procurement, you'll be able to save more. Will you provide the more detailed information when you get to the Finance Committee, or will you continue to provide estimated figures at the FC? Will you simply provide an estimate based on the design and build contract, or wait until the returned tender prices are ready for the central procurement to provide the detailed figures? Our goal is that we will only issue the tender documents for central procurement in October or November. After we've got the returned tender, we will refine the design. The figures included in this particular document cover our estimate, and the estimates were derived from previous similar projects. And the future figures should not deviate from the estimated figures here. As to whether costs will be lower after the returned tender prices are ready, well, as I said, there is a list of recognized MIC contractors. We hope that we will have enough bidders and we will get a good and fair returned tender price. You said you will adopt the central procurement strategy. And if you haven't held a tendering exercise of the central procurement, I want to know if the contractor will help assemble the MIC modules for you. Well, there is a dedicated department responsible for central procurement, and we will procure the MIC modules directly from the contractors. The MIC contractor will be responsible for transporting and delivering the modules. As for the assembly, the principal contractor will be responsible for that. There is a clear division of work. So in our tendering exercise, there will not be a separate part of central procurement. We will sign the same contract with the contractor we work with, and that will happen in around October to November. I think the discussion we had is very important because it is not covered in the paper. Also, it will directly affect the cost of the project. I want to know if issues of responsibility will arise if you are going to ask the contractor to be responsible for transporting, delivering, as well as assembling the MIC modules. Will more detailed information be provided by the administration? Ms. Doris Ho? Yes, we're happy to provide further information, and I'd like to take this opportunity to add a few points. Just now, Mr. Lee explained the procurement strategy. The government will be the buyer, and we directly procure MIC modules from the contractor. Like Mr. Lee said, the Architectural Services Department will issue a contract for the central procurement. As some members said, it's going to be bulk procurement. We want to procure as many modules as possible in order to drive down the cost. So we will procure all the MIC modules we need for different projects in one go. While the government adopt the MIC approach, this is not the first time we ask contractor to procure the MIC modules for us. As mentioned, we adopted the same approach when we built the light public housing estates. Back then, we asked contractors to procure the modules for us, so we have the relevant experience. We have also asked suppliers to procure the modules for us, and the suppliers transported the modules to the contractors directly for us, and there were no issues with that. We will provide the detailed information after the meeting. Next, Mr. Lam Chan Sing. Thank you, Chairman. The estimated cost of this project was $9.9 billion, and it surprised the public with a high price tag. Last week, the government responded to an oral reply and provided more information about this project. According to the government, this is not an average joint user complex. Instead, it is like another government headquarters in the northern metropolis. Well, I agree that we need an iconic government building in the northern metropolis. Now, $200 million have been saved. But I still have the same questions as asked by Mr. Lam. With the MIC and MIMEP approach, the cost of this project is still higher compared to other joint user complex projects. I want to know if you can further drive down the cost. The administration said it will provide further information, and I really hope that you can further lower the construction cost. Now, this project will cost $9.7 billion. I hope citizens can make good use of the facilities. According to the paper, the government building was designed to be a 25-story one. Now it will be a 27-story building, and the joint user complex will be 6-story high. I hope these two buildings can provide as many services for the public as possible. I want to know if 100 service places to be provided by the childcare center will be enough. And also, with the smart government approach, will you need that many floors for the government building? Perhaps you can reserve more floor spaces for public services. Thank you.
P.S. Ms. Ho. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Member, for the questions. And allow me to supplement. In relation to MIC, the member asked a very good question. If MIC is deployed on such a large scale, then isn't it true that there is even more room to lower the cost? This assumption may be correct, but at the same time, we need to have regard to the fact that there are different uses. We want to be more aggressive in using MIC, but in fact we've only reached about 50%. Half of the office space may not be suitable for MIC to be used. There are also other facilities in the complex, such as a sports center, the community hall, and we're talking about big structures with very big clearance. That is the height from floor to ceiling. That requires a special design. We also have other facilities such as a clinic that adds to the unit cost of construction. Say this clinic may come with special ventilation requirements or a negative pressure space. We need to be careful, and that could jack up the per unit cost. And perhaps I'll stop here. I will lay out the grounds in writing. The second question is about the floor layout. This paper is quite is different from the one we submitted to the panel. And the member is being very meticulous. I want to emphasize that although the floor layout is a bit different, the community facilities accommodated and the floor area that they take up remain the same. I understand members' concern that we should meet the demand for community facilities, but I stress again that we're not only relying on these two structures to meet the demand for community facilities. As explained, we've set aside space in public housing estates nearby to provide community facilities such as family services center, youth centers, and childcare centers. Mr. Jonathan Leung. I think we have been talking at length about the construction cost, and I have heard explanation from the administration about tendering, etc. Now, setting costs aside, I'd like to know whether there is anything that would promote modernized development so as to set up a low carbon and highly effective smart area in Northern Metropolis. Now, this project entails $9.7 billion of cost. I want to know whether, in terms of infrastructure, we will go smart and that BMIS will be used with a central smart management to oversee different departments. How does the government make sure that with investment in technologies, in the future, there will be ways to operate and maintain these buildings in such a way to achieve optimal use of resources and high effectiveness? Because the Northern Metropolis emphasizes sustainable development, and we need to be visionary when it comes to application of technology and saving of energy. Paragraph 40G sets out the indicators when it comes to energy conservation and going green. That is what is the annual reduction of carbon emissions so that we can achieve carbon neutrality through Northern Metropolis. P.S. Well, I will invite the director to explain the use of smart and green technologies. Yes, Mr. Lee from ASD. We use BIM, and we also have the DWSS and Digital Works Supervision System. We also to manage site safety and to promote digital flow of processes. As mentioned, we apply up to 50% and 80% of MIC and MEP. As for energy saved, we're talking about some 10% of energy consumption saved per year. This is set out in paragraph 13. We have green and smart design. For example, we have electric vehicle charging facilities and solar panels. There are 170 panels on the rooftop. We also have BIPV. That is on the southern side. You will find the integrated photovoltaic system. So altogether, we're talking about 21 million kilowatt hours saved, spanning 7,017 square meters. We also have monitoring systems for real-time energy, rainwater harvesting systems, smart lighting systems. We also have other monitoring systems for, say, water seepage, so as to develop a smart government building. Mr. Kissen-Yang. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a follow-up question on the cost effectiveness of the projects, and that is the postal and delivery service. As pointed out by other members, there is a dwindling demand for postal services. 1,200 square meters, however, have been set aside for postal services here. Can we make an adjustment? There is a keener demand for childcare centers and integrated youth services center. Can we make an adjustment so that these two facilities take up the whole of the second floor and we can save the first floor for the postal office in order to achieve greater effectiveness? Because with not so much workload, if the post office takes up such a large space, it will not be effective enough. So please change the layout. Second question. According to media reports earlier, the use of glass panels on the exterior, building exterior, will jack up costs. I want to know whether this is true, comparing to, say, a concrete facade. I'll let the administration explain. The other point is there are photovoltaic elements incorporated in glass panels nowadays that could help generate electricity. Can we do something similar for this green building so as to reduce energy consumption and save cost? Third point, the permanent secretary refers to 10,000 square feet of public open space. It's nicely designed according to the artist's impression. I strongly support that. But since you have a childcare center and the ICYSC, will you also provide recreational facilities for small children at the public open space as well? Now, about the issue of the old postal office, as permanent secretary already agreed to consider and review the arrangements in light of the function of postal office. Now, in fact, Mr. Lee already explained that on the southern side of the building, BIPV will be introduced, and that's equivalent to the so-called photovoltaic glass panels, as mentioned by the member. I will give the floor to the PS, perhaps. Let me say a few words. On postal facilities, we will discuss with the Hong Kong Post to see if the spatial requirement can be adjusted, and if necessary, having regard to what the member said, perhaps we can adjust not only the size of the post office but also the location. About 10,000 square meters of public open space and the provision of leisure facilities for small children, we will consider that during the detailed design stage. I will ask Mr. Lee to take this question on glass panels, whether it's particularly costly. Now we need to have good illumination and ventilation. So in fact, the unit cost for window wall system is comparable to that in other projects. As for the long term, of course, we need to have regard to repair and maintenance, and still we believe in a modern building design, glass panels would be a suitable option. As for BIPV, well, I mentioned that earlier. With suitable orientation, and that's on the southern facade, we have BIPV for some 1,700 square meters of panels, and altogether, together with the panels on the rooftop, we'll be able to save up to 21 million kilowatts per hour. Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Chairman. We're now discussing this investment of $9.7 billion to build the joint user complex and joint user general office building in Kutong North. In principle, I support the project. This can expedite the development of Northern Metropolis, and we can also make optimal use of land resources to provide facilities ranging from sports, recreational, education, and healthcare and welfare facilities in order to meet public needs. The paper refers to shops, eateries, the library, as well as a sports center that can accommodate up to 1,000 spectators. This arena can host international fencing competitions. Other members raised questions about parking spaces. I'm not going to repeat that. But when it comes to international competitions, you're going to invite guests. So you can envisage many private cars. These may be local residents, tourists. It's important that we give them good experience. This facility may not be as big as Kai Tak Sports Park, but it's important that tourists find it convenient to come, watch the game, and then go enjoy themselves in the restaurant. So in terms of ride-hailing or private cars, can you explain what facilities will be provided to give people a better experience? As for relocation of government departments, according to the paper, you'll be able to save $48 million in rental expenditure every year. These government departments will move in from different parts of Hong Kong. In recent years, we have seen a drop in the level of rent in CBDs or non-CBDs, or at least the trend has remained stable. So can you tell us, since the departments renting outside space may not have paid a lot for the rent, can you explain how you come by the $48 million of saving in rental expenditure? Thank you. Member, for your support. You mentioned the rental savings of $48 million. I will give the floor to the GPA representative in a moment. The other question relates to user experience. You want to give a good experience to local residents using the facilities. I appreciate that. We note your comment on parking. Say for those who come by driving, the entrance of the site is on the northern side. There are loading, unloading areas. In fact, internally, we have had this discussion. During major events or competitions, we may set aside more space within the site for private cars or even coaches to pick up and drop off passengers. I will now give the floor to the GPA, Mr. Mok.
Yeah.
After the proposed building is completed, part of that will be used for provisioning government offices. that are currently in leased premises. The relevant leases will then be terminated. We believe that we can save about $48 million of rental expenditure every year. I know that you'll be able to save $48 million. What I'm saying is that the rent of these premises is actually not that high. I want to know if you have taken this into consideration. The rent is calculated based on the leases that we have signed. And the savings that we are able to achieve are also based on the leases. 5 members are waiting to speak. Members, please pay attention to the time. After these members have spoken, I will put this item to vote. Next, Mr. Aaron Bock. Thank you, Chairman. I declare that I am the director of a one-person consultant company, and I'm also the non-executive director of 2 architecture companies. I'd like to acknowledge the government's effort. You are building a complex that is as large as the electrical complex in the northern metropolis. This is supposed to cost $15 billion, but you have compressed it to $9.7 billion. It might be because the market is not doing so well recently, so the returned tender prices are lower. I think the Architectural Services Department will have to monitor whether all the rules will be complied with by the contractor. Now, I'd like to talk about MIC. The good thing about MIC is that it can help save money, but it also comes with unclear division of work. It looks like the ASD will be responsible for monitoring the entire project. You are only reserving about $72 million for resident site staff costs. I believe that you will rely on your in-house staff to monitor the construction project. So you must make sure that the MIC modules meet the standards. Otherwise, there will be disputes if you realize that the quality of the modules does not meet the standard. Second, about car parking spaces. I agree that you should not build a basement car park because that could help save a lot of money. But my view is that 220 car parking spaces is not enough. At the electrical complex, there are in total 500 car parking spaces. So there's no way that there will only be 220 car parking spaces at the government complex to be built. I know that you will use the automated car parking system, and that should be able to help boost the number of car parking spaces. For example, it could be a multi-story car park. However, according to the paper, it looks like this will be an average car park. It doesn't seem like by using the automated car parking system, you will be able to increase the number of parking spaces. Can you, for example, build a 2-story car park instead of a single-story one? Now, regarding libraries, according to paragraph 10 of the paper, you said you will stick to the Hong Kong standard planning and guidelines. My question is, do we need such a big library nowadays? Many people nowadays read on their computers. We have already had a discussion about library as well as car park. Permanent Secretary, please be brief. I thank the member for the support. On car parking spaces, there will be 220 parking spaces for government officials as well as staff that works in the public organizations there. And we will adopt the automated car parking system. We will think of ways to increase the number of parking spaces. But as mentioned, there will be 20 parking spaces for public use at all times. As for the 220 parking spaces, part of them will be made available for the public during non-working hours. Some members suggested that we identify government land nearby and turn them into short-term tenancy car parking spaces. And we will try to do that. Also, we encourage local residents to use the mass transit system because the MTR station is only a 5-minute walk away. As for the questions about the library, there's an increasing number of books borrowed by citizens. While e-books have been very popular, according to our statistics, there's an increasing number of people borrowing, lending books from our libraries. I believe parents would like to bring their children to the library because this is a parent-child activity. So we cannot simply look at the number of books borrowed or lent by the public to decide whether the future library would be useful. Mr. Kenneth Fogg. Chairman, I'd like to express my support for this project. I believe after the completion of the buildings, with the relocation of government offices, it will help drive the development of the northern metropolis. The National 15th Five-Year Plan also emphasizes that we need to speed up the development of the northern metropolis, so I support the funding proposal. Well, a number of members have already talked about the car park, so I'm not going to repeat the points here. I understand that only a limited number of parking spaces could be provided. Apart from parking spaces, loading and unloading areas is also important. There will be the fencing center and facilities, and athletes will be carrying their equipment with them. Now, from the MTR station to the future complex, it will only take 5 minutes. According to the MTR, for those carrying an equipment that is 130 centimeters in height, you'll have to apply for a special permit. I believe Ms. Vivian Kong should be very familiar with the rules. For those who drive and drop off their passengers at the complex, well, I believe they will need such an area. Adjacent to the two complexes, there is a primary and secondary school. I know the Education Bureau is responsible for this, but since the Development Bureau is here, I'd like to know if you will think about this. A lot of fencing competition nowadays can be held at schools. As you design these schools near the complex, will you take into consideration whether the students can make use of the sports center? So I hope the Development Bureau will take note of this. Please think of the synergy that the sports center can create for the students nearby. Now, I would like to thank the Development Bureau. The Development Bureau, together with myself, as well as the Fencing Association, has talked about the facilities. However, details will have to be sorted out. For example, will there be enough warming up areas for athletes? Also, if there is live broadcast, will there be connection facilities? Well, I'm not going to ask about the details at this subcommittee, but I hope the Development Bureau or the LCSD can continue to communicate with the Fencing Association about this. Thank you. Permanent Secretary, I thank the member for his support. I understand the member's concern. The sports center will be provided for the Fencing Association for training purposes, and we have considered parking areas for coaches, and we have reserved 4 such parking spaces for coaches. We believe that there will be a keen demand for coach parking, so we will see how we can make better use of the site to address the needs. The member asked about bringing fencing activities into the 2 nearby schools. We will talk to the Education Bureau about this. As for the details of the design, we will definitely continue to communicate with the Fencing Association as well as the member about it. There are 2 members still waiting to speak. After the 2 members have spoken and the relevant government officials have replied, I will put this item to vote. So please watch the time. Members in this complex, please return to the conference room for the rest of the procedure. Next, Ms. Vivian Kong. Thank you, Chairman. I thank the administration for making use of the Future Sports Center to promote fencing. I declare that I used to be a fencing athlete. The sports center will be used by fencing athletes, and that the facility will hold international fencing competitions as well as training events. So I'd like to learn about how the government will be able to achieve its goal. I have some suggestions as well. I understand that the sports center will not only be used for fencing purposes because there are very few such facilities in the world. Most of the fencing training or activities take place in multi-purpose sports center. In Europe, there is a well-renowned fencing venue that has a long history, and now it has become a cultural heritage. Most of these fencing centers or venues are operated by sports clubs. If the goal is to promote fencing in Hong Kong, I hope that this sports center in Kutong North can be used for elite training. I hope that it could also be used for training camps as well as exchange activities. There are fewer athletes participating in fencing compared to other sports such as swimming or other sports. And this is also because fencing equipment has certain requirements. When I first started training, I participated in a training program for young children, and we made use of a temporary venue for training. That was used as an elite training venue back then. According to the paper, the sports center will be used for hosting international fencing competitions. Next month, the Fencing World Cup will take place, but some say that it is too far away because it will take place in the Asia World Expo. I think it is great that international tournaments will be held in this Kutong Sports Center, but for larger scale competitions, they could be held in landmark venues such as the one in Kai Tak or the Hong Kong Coliseum. We only need a venue that is about 14 times 2 meters. And for a lot of the final competitions, we only need 1 lane for the competition. So we definitely is well positioned to hold international fencing competitions. From the 2024 Olympic Games, well, we in total got 6 golds and 1 silver medals. And this break away from the monopoly of European countries. By building this sports center in Tung, we can also promote sports plus ecotourism, because there could be visitors from the Greater Bay Area.
P.S. Thank you, member, for your support. The sports center will carry multiple functions. But like the member said, we will prioritize fencing games. We want to host international competitions as well as making it a training base for non-elite athletes. As for opening hours and the planning for the use of facilities, I will now give the floor to the Deputy Director of LCS or her team to elucidate. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kong, for explaining the excellent performance of our fencing athletes and the recent developments in Hong Kong. In fact, I share the same view as Ms. Vivian Kong. This is a multi-purpose sports center, but we have communicated with the Hong Kong Fencing Association as well. We understand that there is a clear wish for the sports center to provide training facilities for non-elite fencing athletes and for hosting competitions. Ms. Kong made a very good point that in Hong Kong we have a sports venue of different size, of different specification. In fact, for World Championships or the World Cup, we can host the competition in another venue. And we can even make use of West Kowloon Cultural District. So there is very clear positioning in relation to different venues for fencing competitions and events. And about activities to be held in the surrounding area. This sports center comes with 1 main arena and 2 other arenas. This is of scale. That is, we can reserve all the 3 arenas for, say, the division games of the World Cup or other regional games. We have activity rooms as well that can support other purposes such as being the warm-up area and the anti-doping tests. So we have had regard to the flexible use of the facilities in order to promote fencing. Mr. Vincent Chang. Thank you, Chair. I support this development in Kowloon North. As the administration already explained, they have cut down costs and compressed timetable. I think the administration has taken on board our suggestions, but I'm concerned about infrastructure. Like Mr. Kenneth Fox said, I think the administration should continue to communicate with stakeholders. There is room to further optimize the operation. Now, I'm looking at this drawing. There are 2 buildings. And as Ms. Vivian Kong just now mentioned, well, I think this can become an icon in the international community, as this is the only one or perhaps one of the few fencing arenas in the world. But I see the title here. It's the Joint User Complex in Kowloon North without any element of fencing mentioned. Perhaps you can give it a thought and include the fencing element in your design. For example, it's a joint user complex with a fencing pavilion. Well, nowadays people may play badminton in the velodrome. Yet the more important aspect is for cycling. So likewise, you can do the same and include the fencing element here. The swimming pool complex in Victoria Park, for example, accommodates swimming training academies, and there are also cycling facilities in the velodrome. Likewise, is there space reserved for the same purpose as well on top of F&B and other business or commercial purposes? P.S. Thank you, member, for the support. I think the first comment relates to the incorporation of fencing elements at the detailed design stage. Yes, we can give it a thought and find the best solution. The second point is this. In fact, that's the member's question. Is there room space-wise to accommodate commercial operations relating to fencing? We need to be careful. We're short of floor space. So to answer your question whether there is any extra floor space not yet allocated to any particular use, for the time being, I really can't think of any, but I don't want to say no outright. So we'll give it a thought at a detailed design stage, because we're talking about integrated development of sports and industry. So you should include that element as well. As for the title, how about fencing arena cum joint user complex? Because if it's just joint user complex, there is no correlation with fencing whatsoever. Is there any room to change the title? P.S. We will go back and give it a thought. Next, Mr. Jiang Pui Kong. Thank you, Chair. I support the joint user complex project in Kutong North, but I'm concerned about the public coffers. This project will cost $9.7 billion. There is expectation from the public for costs to be driven down. I think the government will see to that. But I'd like to turn to financial implications. Furniture and equipment, that is item H, F, and E. The whole building spans over 30 stories. For the 27 stories of government offices and 6 stories of community facilities, all the furniture, equipment, computers, terminals, renovation, decoration will be provided. Or is it that government departments or respective operators will proceed to procurement based on the actual needs, because that way we'll be able to achieve even more cost savings? P.S. Well, I will give the floor to Director to explain point H, furniture and equipment. To what extent will furniture and equipment be provided to the government departments moving in, or are we talking about some special equipment and furniture? Director. When it comes to furniture, we usually refer to the replacement of tattered furniture, because usually these government departments will move the existing furniture to the new space. In fact, let me give you some details. For furniture and equipment over $1 million, because there may be different systems involved, and if it's not included in the other overhead, then this will come under furniture and equipment. Anyone else would like to speak? Mr. Aaron Bach would like to speak for the second round, that is in relation to central procurement, whether there be any ambiguity on responsibilities. Permanent Secretary Ms. Doris Ho and Mr. Michael Lee, the Director, already made it clear in their answers that this will not happen for central procurement. But I think that Mr. Aaron Bok and other members would like to clarify the matter. So I'll give Mr. Lee 2 minutes to answer this question. No, Chairman, my question was how the ASD will ensure that the two contractors will not pass the buck to each other. How does the government ensure that this will not happen? Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Member, for the question. I will try to answer that, and I'll see if the Director would like to supplement in a moment. This is not the first time that the government directly procures the MIC modules. The government already had this experience in the construction of light public housing. In other words, the government directly procures the MIC modules for the contractor to assemble them. So we are all experienced. And as explained, the procurement of MIC modules will be undertaken through open tender, subject to requirements. That is, only suppliers with proper certification can take part in the bidding process. By certification, there is a way for the administration to ascertain the capability of producing the MIC modules. I'll give the floor to Mr. Lee to supplement. Well, we have designed and built as the approach, and there are 3 tiers of supervision. For the 3rd tier, this is basically comprising our own staff. In fact, we already have this experience in light public housing. We ask our staff members to wear body-worn cameras. We find it to be very useful because with the body-worn cameras, we'll be able to check for the completion of works up to 100%, and then workers will stay vigilant as well. And on top of the 3 tiers, we also have an independent supervisor directly engaged to find out whether the items on the tender list has been fulfilled. And we'll continue to optimize the whole arrangement. That's the end of the Q&A session. I now put this item to vote. Will those in favor of PWSC 2026-27 paper number 11's recommendations please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. I think the majority of members who have voted are in favor of this recommendation. The recommendation is carried. As to whether we recommend a further discussion of this item by the Finance Committee, according to paragraph 41A of the PWSC procedures, I now put this question to a vote. That this subcommittee recommends a further discussion of the recommendations in PWSC 2026-27 paper number 11 by the Finance Committee. I remind members that if you support this item, that means the subcommittee supports and recommends a further discussion of this paper by the Finance Committee. If this question is vetoed, that means the subcommittee does not recommend a further discussion of this paper by the FC. Will those in favor please raise your hands? Those against, please raise your hands. I think the majority of members who have voted are not in favor of this item. So the item is not carried. The subcommittee does not recommend a further discussion of the recommendations in PWSC 2026-27 paper number 11 by the Finance Committee. That wraps up the discussion of this item. I thank the public officers for attending the meeting. We now move on to the next item. Let's invite the next team of administration to come in. Members, I suggest extending the meeting by 15 minutes up to 1:15 so that we can complete the procedures. Moving on to the third item, 181 CD drainage improvement works in Eastern District. Paper PWSC 2026-27, number 12. Members, if you want to speak, please press the request to speak button.
份文件呢係建議把181 CD 號工程計劃嘅餘下部分提升為甲級，讓付款。
Members are invited to recommend to the FC the upgrading of the remainder of 181 CD entitled Drainage Improvement Works in Eastern District remaining works to Category A at an estimated cost of $2,718.2 million. The administration consulted the relevant panel, and the panel supported this proposal and the discussion of this item at this subcommittee. The salient points of the discussion at the panel meeting have been emailed to members on the 25th of June. I see that 3 members have asked to speak. I'll give each member 4 minutes, including questions and answers. Ms. Elaine Check. On the building of tunnels, I actually visited the drainage tunnels in Lai Chi Kok, and the tunnel there adopted the same design, and the design could help prevent sediment and settlement of and ensure recycling of storm water. Now from Shao Kei Wan to Chai Wan, will there be a stilling basin? Also, in the feasibility study, have you made an assessment? Also, I'd like to ask about the outfall in Akong Am Road, because the water will go directly to Lei Yu Mun, and it is one of the natural shorelines that have not been damaged. I want to know if the outfall will be similar to the one in Chun Wan. Will you make use of large-scale concrete structure to build the outfall, or will you use more inconspicuous design that would integrate with the landscape to reduce major visual impacts? Lastly, there were people who snuck into this kind of outfalls for taking pictures. In times of flooding, it could lead to very serious consequences. So in terms of the design, I want to know if you will install sensors to prevent those who aren't authorized to sneak in. Deputy Secretary, I thank Ms. Elaine Chek for the questions about stilling basins. The member is correct that we need such a facility to prevent sediments from blocking the drainage. However, unlike Lai Chi Kok, there will be 7 outfalls, and there will be stormwater harvesting systems. And during dry seasons, we deploy vehicles and clear the debris there. And I would like to draw members' attention to enclosure 2. We hope to build natural outfalls. We will increase the height of outfalls to 6 meters above wind sea level. The outfalls will be close to plants and vegetation so that they will be less conspicuous. We'll be very careful not to damage the area because it is at the Victoria Harbour, and we will be very careful about that. As for whether there will be any anti-climbing sensors, these kind of sensors may affect drainage, so we won't install such sensors. To prevent people from sneaking in, we are going to put in place measures. We are referring to 6 meters above wind sea level. That's about a 7-story high building. So it's going to be quite tall. There will also be cameras installed to prevent people from climbing in. Next, Ms. Kwok Foo-yong. The anti-flooding infrastructures in Hong Kong have topped the world. This is because the Drainage Services Department have done a lot of work, and I appreciate their efforts. This project will cost about $2.7 billion, and I have the following 2 suggestions and questions. First, about the returned tender prices as well as the monitoring of contract. According to the paper, the returned tender prices is about 200 to 300 million less than the original estimate, which is a drop of about 7 to 9%. So what was the reason behind? Is it because construction costs have been lowered? In what areas did you manage to save money? And would that affect the quality of the project? Please elaborate. Second, about the use of technology. I see that if we want to adopt technology in this project, of course, it is a good thing, but we want to see effective results. Paragraph 21 of the paper says that robotics as well as AI will be made use of, but it falls short of telling us the details. I want to know, by leveraging such technologies, how much money will be saved and how much time will be shortened. And in what areas of this project will you use AI and such construction robots? Deputy Secretary. The returned tender prices are 8% lower than the original estimate. There are a few reasons behind. For example, contractors were more confident about certain use of technologies, and that's why they lowered the cost. And also, there were unforeseen circumstances when we arrived at the estimate. Well, 8% is not a significant drop. I think it is because of commercial reason that contractors raised the returned tender prices. But please rest assured, every time we look at the technical report before we ask contractor to return the tender prices, so it will not compromise the quality. And throughout the project, we will deploy staff to monitor the quality. In terms of adoption of technologies, during construction, we will make use of AI cameras to monitor the construction vehicles. In the drainage tunnels, we will install tracks. We hope that we can make use of robots to monitor the situation in the tunnels. It's going to be a confined space, so we hope that we can use robots instead of human labor to help monitor the situation. We will also make use of optic fibers to monitor the situation of pipes, and we believe it will be more effective. We'll also make use of digital technologies to ensure real-time monitoring of the situation inside the drainage tunnels. We won't just manage to save money. We will also be able to boost efficiency, and these are unquantifiable contribution. Members in this electrical complex, please pay attention to the progress of this meeting. After all members have spoken, I'll put this item to vote. Next, Dr. Ben Chen. Thank you, Chairman. Other members have raised the same questions I had in mind. Regarding the outfalls, Undersecretary said there is no way to prevent people from climbing in. If there are debris, it will block the tunnel. However, for mountains nearby, will there be fences to be erected in the surrounding mountains to prevent people from going in? I hope that you will consider this measure. Also, I know that this drainage tunnel has to be 5 meters wide in order to withstand once in a 200-year rainfall. However, the facilities we have can only withstand once in a 50-year rainstorm. We may see more serious rainfall, so I want to know if there are more resilient facilities that could be built, or will there be flexibility in this regard? Undersecretary, regarding the first question, it is not a site that is easily accessible. There are mountainous slopes, and there are very few pedestrian accesses. Unless you climb in from nearby woodlands, you might be able to enter the site. I will talk to the relevant departments to see if we can put in place any measures to prevent people from reaching that area. As said, our design as well as the technologies to be used can prevent people from illegally entering the site. Second, about our design standards. By once in a 200 years, we're talking about the possibility of a very serious rainfall. We have to take into consideration the cost effectiveness of the construction. The anti-flooding infrastructure we have can withstand once in a 200-year rainstorm. In many places, they only have infrastructure that can withstand once in a century rainfall. But it is because Hong Kong is a unique place with unique topography. There are many mountains and slopes. We expect that we will see heavier rainfall in the coming century. That is 172 millimeters per hour. For black rainstorm, it is 70 millimeters per hour. In 2023, the rainstorm we saw was 158 millimeters per hour. Be it anti-flooding infrastructure or breakwaters near the shore, they are designed to withstand climate change in this century. We will make sure that we'll be able to cope with extreme weather that we will see at the end of the century. For now, we manage what we might foresee in the up to the middle of this century. Some members asked how the administration can prevent people from sneaking into the outfall to take pictures. The administration said it would make use of technologies, whether it is camera or AI technologies. Will they be installed near the outfalls so that you will be informed once there are people who try to get in? Yes. We do not want anyone to climb into the tunnel. We do not want to see any accidents. So we will definitely put in place measures to prevent that from happening.
Next, Mr. Moonkit. Thank you, Chairman. The per meter cost of this project is roughly $659,000. This is, after all, the stormwater drainage tunnel, comparing to the similar projects in Chun Wan and West Kowloon, the construction cost is similar. But then for Chun Wan or West Kowloon, it's a vehicular tunnel. So I'd like to know, in terms of technical difficulties or geological conditions, why is it that there is little difference in terms of cost for a non-vehicular tunnel? Have you considered for dry weather interception of the sort, will the downstream becomes dry? Will this cause irreversible impact on aquatic plants or other species downstream in the Nautilus downstream? Thank you, Chair. To answer members' question, it's actually an apple-to-apple comparison because the original drainage tunnel can be compared with other projects. Now, we cannot compare directly, however, because of different challenges facing different projects. So we can just give a ballpark figure and invite members to have a sense of the difference in construction cost. Now the design is this. For this intake design, effluent from existing drains will be collected at the intake, and then if the water level is low, then they will make use of the existing sewage network for discharge into the sea. They will not make use of this channel. However, during flooding or when water level is high, then we'll make use of the drainage channel here, and that means it's for tackling flooding. So there is no concern as to whether during dry season or rainy season the species at the downstream will be affected. There will be no difference. Ms. Christine Fong. I think it's a good policy to implement the system in order to help with discharge from of runoff from the top of Hong Kong Island East. And I see from the paper that the per unit construction cost is $659,000 per square meter. Does it include the use of prefab materials? That is, does it help with maintaining the natural slope? Because flooding may affect natural hillside, and that with this structure in place, to what extent will you be able to keep the structure of the natural landscape, natural slope safe? And according to the paper, the new engineering contract or NEC will be adopted. That is devised by the UKIE or Institution of Civil Engineers of UK. Is this the established practice? Will you introduce more NECs for other civil engineering contracts in the future? Mr. Lam. Thank you. To answer the member's question, we will create a 3.6 meter long tunnel. Frankly, it's unlikely that we use prefab materials because we'll need to bore through some really hard rock surface. Instead, we will rely on blasting and drilling works. As for the slopes, we have 7 outlets, close to 300 tons. And this can help with the drainage of runoff at normal times even. But of course, there are a number of factors affecting the structure of the hillside. We'll be able to protect 170,000 population living at the foot of the hill, spanning 260 hectares. We've adopted a new policy for public works. We emphasize collaboration with contractors so as to achieve high cost effectiveness. We have the Hong Kong version of the NEC. This is basically the way to go for all the public works projects now. This is adopted not only in Hong Kong. In fact, even in Shanghai, the mainland, they have begun to adopt NECs as well because of the merits entailed. And in fact, this is a world-acclaimed approach. It has won some international awards as well. Any follow-up, Ms. Fong? Two members would like to ask questions. As I can see, I plan to draw the line after Mr. Dennis Leung has spoken. I will put this item to a vote. If you want to ask questions, please indicate so as early as possible so that there will be a chance for you to speak. Mr. Chan Pui Leung, Deputy Chair. At Fei Shui Road and Yu Hing Road, 2 tunnels will be built so as to alleviate pressure on the downstream by diverting the runoffs through this channel to Pak Sha Wan. I see that there is an interchange or a meeting point, and that after that interchange, the effluent will go via the Pak Sha Wan outfall. And this design will cope with once in a 200-year rainfall event, and it is expected that 300 hectares of water will be collected. So this will put a lot of pressure at the interchange. Is there anything in your design to prevent problems arising from extreme water pressure causing wear and tear of the parts, and in the event of spilling or spilling over, will there be an impact or risk caused to structures at the foot of the hill or downstream? Under Secretary. Well, I will give the floor to a DSD colleagues to explain, but let me first explain that we use computer simulation. And we also need to have regard to the tensile strength of the structure as well as geological conditions. The tunnel itself will be protected by hard rocks, simply put, so it's comparatively safe. And we're going to deploy new technologies. For example, there'll be robots patrolling on a regular basis. We do not need to deploy manpower. There will also be a health monitoring system along the structure to check for deformation or wear and tear. These ways, even during heavy rainfalls, the structural safety will not be compromised. As for works details, I will give the floor to the DSD. Mr. Lee, Director. Well, thank you for the questions. The Director the Undersecretary already explained the details. We will expand the point of contact gradually for convergence of the streams of water, and we also make use of a 3D computer simulation to assimilate the hydro current aspects, and we also have some hard rock layers underneath that will provide protection. Two members have indicated they wish to speak, and to allow time for us to complete this item, let me ask members if you'd like to further extend the meeting beyond 1:15 until completion of this item. If there is no objection, we will further extend this meeting until we have completed this item. Thank you, Chair. I read this paper submitted to the subcommittee. I also read the paper submitted to the panel. I also read the relevant information. I understand that there are 7 points of intake, but I don't understand the exact locations. This is not clearly expressed in the paper. Apart from intake 1 and intake 7 that are situated exactly where the drainage tunnel is. In fact, for the remaining 6 intakes, you need another surface tunnel to connect them to the drainage tunnel. So I'd like to have information about these surface tunnels to make sure that runoffs will be properly collected. So my question for the Development Bureau is this. Is there any information for our reference about the intake and outfalls so that rainwater can be effectively collected to cope with the situation as mentioned by the Undersecretary, that, for example, when rainfall reaches 170 millimeters per hour, and have you factored that in when you conducted the simulation? Undersecretary, we followed a very precise hydro model in preparing this design. When it comes to intake and outfall, it's not the case of having a physical hole. We're talking about structures underground, and that at these points rainwater is collected and they are diverted to the main drainage channel. The intakes are constructed at different depths underground, subject to different conditions. I can provide the supplementary information afterwards. I just want to emphasize that this is not just a simple design of an intake. It's a collection point that allows collection of rainwater close to 300 hectares. Next, Mr. Augustine Wong. Thank you, Chair. I think my question has been answered, and that is about the, about where these intakes are, whether they are at grade. Undersecretary, no, not at grade. They will be covered. They will be constructed underground. Right. Are there other questions? If not, I will now put this paper to a vote. Members who are in favor of the recommendations in paper number PWSC 2026-27-12, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. I think the majority of members who have voted are in favor of this recommendation. So this recommendation is carried. As for whether the item should be further discussed by the Finance Committee, I now put the following question to a vote according to paragraph 41A of the PWSC procedures, that this subcommittee recommends a further discussion of the recommendations in PWSC 2026-27-12 by the Finance Committee. I remind members that if this question is passed, it means that the subcommittee recommends a further discussion of this paper by the FC. If this question is vetoed, that means the subcommittee does not recommend a further discussion of this paper by FC. Will those in favor please raise your hands? Those against, please raise your hands. I think the majority of members who have voted are not in favor of this question. So this question is vetoed. The subcommittee does not recommend a further discussion of PWSC 2026-27-12 by the Finance Committee. That's the end of discussion of this item. Thank you, administration, for coming to our meeting. Members, there are still a number of outstanding items. The next meeting will be held on the 3rd of July, and that's this Friday at 8:30 to 10:30. This will be an additional meeting to deal with the outstanding items on the agenda today. I urge members to be there on time. Thank you.